After 17 years of showing up early, leaving late, and never once calling in sick, I was summoned to a 5-minute meeting that erased me. I still remember the tap-tap of my shoes against the marble hallway of Trinity Systems' executive floor. I'd walked that stretch hundreds of times, often with reports in hand or wires in my pocket, always on my way to fix someone else's mess. But that morning felt different. Too quiet, too still. The kind of stillness that warns you something is about to break. When I stepped into the conference room, Sheila from HR was already there. So was Dennis Maddox, our new director of operations. He had only been around 6 months, barely enough time to remember everyone's names, but just long enough to start reshaping things in ways that didn't sit right with me. Dennis didn't look up from his tablet. Sheila gave me that polite, distant smile HR people are trained to master. "Graham," she said softly, "please have a seat." I didn't sit. I stood with my hands clasped behind my back like I had during Navy briefings years ago. It was my instinct. When you're about to get blindsided, you square your shoulders and keep your chin up. Dennis finally spoke, still not meeting my eyes. "Effective immediately, your position is being dissolved as part of a department-wide restructuring initiative." His tone was flat, transactional, like he was reading off a lunch order. I didn't say a word, didn't blink. He continued, "You'll receive a 3-week severance. Your access to the building and systems has already been disabled. Security will escort you to your desk shortly to collect any personal belongings." There it was, just like that. 17 years reduced to a pre-written script and a forgotten keycard. I turned to Sheila. "Was there an incident? A performance concern?" She hesitated. "No, this isn't disciplinary. It's just streamlining. Realignment. Realignment." I almost laughed. That word had been floating around Trinity for months, ever since Dennis arrived and started talking about efficiency over loyalty in team meetings. I knew this was coming, just not how soon or how quietly. I walked out with a single cardboard box and the knowledge that I had trained half the people who now stood around pretending not to make eye contact. The security guard, a kid named Ty who always greeted me with a fist bump, kept his head down as he led me to the elevator. At the front doors he whispered, "Sorry man." I nodded. "Don't be. It wasn't your call." Outside, the sky was the same dull grey it had been when I arrived that morning, but everything beneath it had changed. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my truck in the parking lot, staring at the office windows for nearly an hour. Some part of me hoped someone would come down, maybe Rebecca from finance or Tom from data services, someone to say, "This is wrong." But no one did, because I was no longer part of the system. I wasn't angry yet. Anger requires a sense of betrayal, and betrayal requires expectation. What I felt was empty, like a drawer that had been quietly cleaned out while I wasn't looking. But what Dennis didn't know, what none of them realized, was that while they'd cut me loose without warning, they had also handed me something far more valuable than a paycheck. Freedom. I hadn't been unemployed since I was 21. Back then, it felt like a natural part of life, floating between gigs, figuring things out. But at 52, standing in the kitchen of a quiet 2-bedroom home in Hartford, Connecticut, it hit differently. The fridge hummed. The coffee maker clicked. The rest was silence. My wife, Evelyn, had already left for her job at the dental clinic. I didn't tell her what happened. Not yet. She had a full day of appointments and a weekly payroll to sort. Dropping this bomb on her now felt cruel. So I sat in my old reading chair by the window, the same one I'd bought after our daughter moved out, and just stared. Out at the neighbor's trimmed hedges, the mailman walking his usual route. Life, as it always was, continuing without me. By noon the numbness gave way to habit. I booted up my laptop and opened a spreadsheet. I listed my contacts, the clients I'd managed, the engineers I'd trained, even the vendor reps I'd stayed in touch with. Then I moved on to updating my resume, a task I hadn't touched in nearly 2 decades. The problem was, I couldn't write fired. So I wrote position eliminated as part of company-wide restructuring. A lie, maybe, but also the only truth that wouldn't get my application tossed on arrival. That evening, Evelyn came home and found me at the stove, stirring chili. "You're cooking?" she asked, dropping her bag. "Did the apocalypse happen?" I smiled faintly. "Something like that." She stopped mid-step. "What happened?" I took a deep breath and said it straight. "They let me go." Her hand went to her mouth. "What? Are you serious?" I nodded. No warning, just a meeting, a box, and a ride out. She sat down slowly, eyes searching mine for answers. "I don't get it. After everything you've done for them," I shrugged. "Doesn't matter. It's done." That night, after she'd gone to bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind spun in loops, not just of fear or anger, but of memory. The early years at Trinity, fixing servers at 2 a.m. during a winter storm, staying through weekends to finish security overhauls. The time the CEO's personal laptop was hijacked by ransomware, and I recovered every file without billing a single hour of overtime. And yet here I was, a line item erased with no ceremony. But I wasn't going to whine about it. I'd survived worse. I'd rebuilt from less. And right now, I needed to keep my brain moving. I started digging, not out of revenge, not yet, more out of curiosity. I remembered a few things about Dennis, little quirks. He always insisted on using his own flash drive during meetings, even when company policy required files to stay on secure cloud platforms. He bypassed internal ticketing for system access, always through back doors requesting temporary admin override from one of the junior techs. It didn't raise alarms at the time, just seemed like executive privilege. But now, with no job to lose, I decided to look deeper. I accessed an old backup I'd made on my personal drive, one from a server upgrade project 9 months earlier. Nothing illegal, just a routine diagnostic image I'd downloaded for off-site testing. I had forgotten to delete it. Inside, I found directory logs, access timestamps, and something odd, multiple login attempts to archived financial directories. Late at night, using Dennis's admin credentials, but Dennis wasn't authorized for finance. That access should have required dual sign-off. And yet, there it was. I leaned back in my chair, my pulse steady, my focus sharpening, because suddenly, this wasn't just about being let go, it was about why I was let go. And as I dug further, one thought took root and refused to leave. He fired me to cover his tracks. I wasn't a hacker. I was a systems man, good with structure, better with patterns. I didn't break into places. I just knew where the back doors were, because I helped install most of them. Over the next few days, while the job applications went out and silence came back, I spent my evenings revisiting Trinity's digital footprint, or at least the version of it that lived in that dusty server image I'd saved by habit. At first glance, nothing looked off. Clean directories, standard protocol files, logs that only a bored tech or paranoid manager would read. But then came the anomalies. A PDF folder nested 4 layers deep inside a directory labeled Q2_archives_old. Inside it were documents titled like gibberish: RPTs_F0981X, Imenthly 878Z, Gel Sinkold 9. To someone else, these would be skipped without question, but I knew naming habits. Dennis didn't name anything randomly. He always coded it just enough to fly under radar, but not enough to confuse himself. So I opened one, and then another, and by the third, I knew exactly what I was looking at. It wasn't fraud, not in the traditional sense. It was subtle, ingenious even. Dennis had set up a mirror pathway, rerouting tiny fractions of vendor payments through a private sub-account. Not enough to trigger flags, not enough to be noticed by upper management doing big picture audits. But over months, it would have easily skimmed 6 figures. I documented everything, screenshotted file structures, annotated timestamps, matched activity logs to Dennis's known login sessions. Then I saved it all to an encrypted USB and made a hard copy printout, just for good measure. If anything were to happen to my system or my files, I wanted this trail to exist beyond digital form. By now, Evelyn had started noticing I was preoccupied. "You're not sleeping much," she said one evening while we sat on the porch. "Just trying to stay sharp," I replied. She studied me a long moment. "Is this about Trinity? About Dennis?" I didn't answer, because it was more than just about Dennis now. It was about what they tried to erase. Not just a job, but a man's contribution, his years, his integrity. One night, I received a call from Tom Myers, a quiet, soft-spoken data analyst I'd trained during his first year at Trinity. "I heard what happened," he said. "It's garbage, Graham. You didn't deserve that." I appreciated the sympathy, but something in his voice lingered, like he wanted to say more. I pressed gently. "You still running the file audits?" He hesitated. "Not really. They pulled us off that. Said everything's being centralized now." "That doesn't sound right." He chuckled bitterly. "Nothing's been right since Maddox showed up." That was all I needed to hear. I closed the call and looked out my study window. The street was empty. The lamps buzzed. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once and fell silent. And in that silence, I felt the shift, the moment where hurt calcifies into resolve. Dennis had bet on everyone staying quiet, on me staying gone. But what he didn't realize was, I hadn't disappeared. I had just stepped out of sight, to aim. In the weeks that followed, I stopped thinking like an employee. I started thinking like a technician again. Not the kind Trinity had come to tolerate, one buried in tickets and badge resets, but the one who used to fix infrastructure, rebuild firewalls from scratch, and patch systems under pressure when everything else was burning down. I kept my days outwardly normal. I'd wake up, walk the dog, make coffee for Evelyn, and scan job boards. But behind the curtain, I was charting. Not revenge. Proof. My house slowly turned into a war room. Sticky notes lined one wall, labeled with file names, dates, and initials. My desk was covered in printed logs, receipts from past vendor communications, and a running timeline that traced Dennis's internal movements over his first year. The pattern was unmistakable. He'd positioned himself inside 3 departments: ET, Finance, and Procurement. Small, seemingly harmless access changes, each granted temporarily under system improvement justifications. I saw the paper trails, I knew the gaps, because I'd built the systems he snuck through. But I wasn't going to Trinity's board, not yet. Going back now, a fired employee accusing their golden new hire would be suicide. They'd dismiss me as bitter, maybe even legally threaten me for accessing unauthorized data. So instead, I built a case the old-fashioned way, through people. I started with Tom Myers. I asked questions without asking. Confirmed access logs, pulled screenshots from archived servers he still had rights to. Then came Ava Coldwell, procurement coordinator. She owed me a favor. 2 years ago, I caught a glitch in the inventory system that nearly cost her a promotion. Now, she was ready to talk. He's been approving orders twice, she whispered during a call. One real, one shadow. Same item codes, different delivery addresses. Addresses? I asked. Mostly to a place listed under a vendor shell company. I traced it once, then got pulled from the task. Do you remember the company name? She hesitated, then replied, North Point Supply Solutions. I froze. That wasn't a real supplier. It was a dummy account, one I remembered setting up during a sandbox test 4 years ago. It had never been activated, never meant to be real, until Dennis found it and turned it into his personal delivery pipeline. That night, Evelyn found me asleep at my desk. The monitor was glowing, my notes scattered across the keyboard. She touched my shoulder gently. Graham, what is all this? I looked up, eyes heavy. I think I know how he's doing it, and I think I know where the money's going. She sat beside me. Then what's next? I paused, then said quietly, I'm not taking it to them. I'm taking it to someone they can't ignore. There's a power in paper. In an age where everything lives in clouds and inboxes, people forget the weight a manila envelope can carry. The feel of it, the way it thuds on a desk, the permanence of it. So I printed everything, not just screenshots, not just log trails, but flowcharts, timelines, itemized comparisons. Every dollar skimmed, every fake vendor purchase, every access request that Dennis filed through backdoor channels and rerouted under dummy codes. It took me 3 days to compile. I triple-checked every document, made sure there were no personal identifiers that could be pinned back to anyone who helped me. Ava and Tom had stuck their necks out. I wouldn't let them get burned. I bound it all in a black report cover, simple, clean, no branding. And I placed it inside a thick envelope marked ETN, Executive Oversight Committee, confidential. I knew exactly where to send it. A month before my termination, I had worked closely with Trinity's former CFO, Peter Hallgren. He'd taken a health-related leave and was quietly replaced while Dennis restructured the financial department. Peter was known for 2 things, his distrust of shortcuts and his ironclad sense of ethics. I found a P.O. box listed in public records, one still active under his name. It was a risk, yes, but Peter wasn't the kind of man to throw away a package labeled confidential without opening it. I dropped it off personally. No return address, no note, just the truth, bound and delivered. The next few days stretched like a rubber band pulled too tight. I still applied for jobs, still cooked dinner, still laughed when Evelyn showed me a video of a cat riding a Roomba. But underneath it all, I waited. Not for vengeance, for acknowledgement. For that moment when the people who erased me had to pause and ask, how did we not see this coming? On the 5th day, I received a voicemail. Blocked number. Gravel thick voice. Mr. Lawson, this is Peter Hallgren. I received your package. I've reviewed the contents. I will be in contact. Do not respond to anyone from Trinity until you hear from me directly. Click. That was it. No emotion, no promise, just steel. And that was all I needed. That night, I poured a glass of whiskey and sat on the porch. The wind carried the smell of fresh-cut grass and the low hum of summer insects. I looked up at the stars and thought, They thought firing me would silence me. But silence isn't the absence of noise, it's the presence of something deeper, something calm, something permanent. And right now, I wasn't shouting. I was aiming carefully. It started as a whisper. A week after I sent the envelope, a contact pinged me. Aaron Winters, a systems specialist still buried deep in Trinity's server team. He texted, not from his work phone, but his personal. Something's up. Maddox missed 2 exec meetings, each hour closed-door huddles. You hear anything? I didn't reply. Not yet. Because I already had. That morning, I'd received a second voicemail from Peter Hallgren. This time, he wasn't alone. Graham, this is Peter. I've brought this matter to outside counsel. The executive board is reviewing your documentation. We'll be in touch shortly regarding next steps. Do not initiate contact with anyone affiliated with Trinity. We've initiated an audit. Audit. That word alone carries weight. And if Peter had convinced the board to trigger one, that meant they weren't brushing this under the rug. They were digging. 3 days later, I saw the first headline. It wasn't front page, just a sidebar mention on a regional business site. Trinity Systems under internal review, amid allegations of financial irregularities. No names, no accusations. Just the kind of corporate language meant to say everything and nothing at once. But I read between the lines, because I had written them. I didn't celebrate. I just sat in my study, surrounded by open binders, loose documents, and annotated folders. And I let the silence settle like dust after a demolition. This wasn't the end. Not yet. But it was the moment where the ground started shifting under Dennis's feet. Then came the call from Ava. I got pulled into a meeting, she said. Voice low, tense. Not with HR, with legal. My chest tightened. Did they pressure you? No. They asked about purchase orders. Said they were reopening old files. Wanted to know if I ever noticed duplicate suppliers. And what did you say? She paused. I told them I brought it up last year, and that I was removed from the file without explanation. That was the truth, and it was enough to widen the crack. Evelyn noticed the shift in me that week. You're sleeping again, she said one morning, handing me coffee. And not talking in your sleep. I used to talk in my sleep. She smirked. Only when you were stressed. Usually muttering server commands or yelling about corrupt file paths. I chuckled. That sounds like me. Then she looked me in the eye and asked the one question I hadn't expected. Is it worth it? I didn't answer right away. Because revenge isn't always loud or satisfying in the ways we expect. Sometimes it's subtle. A crack forming in a wall someone thought was impenetrable. It's not about them, I finally said. It's about making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to the next guy. 2 days later, Aaron texted again. Maddox escorted out by security. Whole floor watched. HR says it's temporary leave. Yeah, right. I read the words twice, then shut my phone, stood from my desk and walked outside. The wind felt different, sharper, cleaner. I didn't cheer, didn't smile. I just whispered to the breeze. Checkmate. The email came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 37 days after Dennis was escorted from the building. No header, no bold announcement, just a short, almost sheepish message from Trinity's executive coordinator. Mr. Lawson, the board would like to schedule a private conversation at your convenience. This is not disciplinary or adversarial. Please let us know if you are willing to discuss. I stared at the screen, rereading the sentence. Not adversarial. That told me everything I needed to know. They weren't just rattled. They were realigning, not the departments this time, but their narrative. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I walked down to the corner cafe, ordered a black coffee, and sat on the same bench where I used to eat lunch between long system deployments. Back when I still thought 17 years of loyalty meant something. The sun was warm. A soft breeze rustled the newspaper, clutched by the old man next to me. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe, not just physically, but emotionally. I had exposed Dennis, not through fury, not through court, but through competence. And now the very place that tried to erase me was dialing my number again. I called Peter Halgren. He answered on the second ring. "I assume you got the message," he said. I did. "I'm not officially part of Trinity anymore, but let's just say I'm advising where it counts." I appreciated that. Peter had always been one of the few who cared about people before profit. "They'll want to offer something," he continued. "A settlement, maybe even a role. They won't admit fault, but make no mistake, they know they wronged you." I paused. "Then let's see how much that knowledge is worth." The meeting was scheduled for Friday morning. Same building, same floor, but not the same conference room. This one had windows. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing the same grey jacket I'd worn the day I was fired. Partly for irony, partly for closure. Inside were 3 board members, a neutral attorney, and surprisingly, the new interim CEO, a woman named Celeste Bryant. I had only met her once years ago, when she'd still been in legal. She rose when I entered, offered a handshake. "Mr. Law, thank you for coming." I nodded and took my seat. They didn't apologize. Of course not. But they acknowledged. Celeste began. "What happened to you should not have happened. You were loyal, professional, and deeply trusted by multiple departments. Our failure to recognize what Dennis Maddox was doing, and how your removal facilitated his fraud, is something this board regrets deeply." She didn't read from a script. That mattered. Then she continued, "We're prepared to offer a settlement. In addition, we would like to invite you to return as a systems advisor, part-time or full, your choice, to assist in rebuilding the infrastructure you helped create." I let that sit in the air for a moment, not because I needed time to decide, but because I wanted them to see it. The man they discarded now held the blueprint. I didn't speak right away. The conference room was still, not tense but measured. The kind of quiet that happens when power shifts slowly across a table and everyone's waiting to see who moves first. Celeste watched me calmly. She wasn't nervous. She was prepared. That I respected. So I leaned forward, clasped my hands on the table, and said 3 words: "I'm not interested." A flicker, just a small one, crossed the face of the attorney to her left. The rest remained still. Celeste tilted her head slightly. "Understood. May I ask why?" I nodded. "Because I didn't just lose a job that day. I lost trust, and not just in management, but in the very culture of a company I gave almost 2 decades to. I can't undo that, and I'm not here to patch holes." Someone else ripped open. She didn't argue. Smart. But I wasn't finished. "That said," I continued, "I'm not petty. I'm not interested in lawsuits, and I don't need a plaque. But what I will accept is leverage." Now the lawyer blinked. Celeste leaned in. "Define leverage." So I did. I laid out my terms like a man placing tools on a bench. A full severance package, retroactively extended to match 17 years of service. A formal letter of recognition signed by the board, placed in Trinity's permanent HR archive. A consulting contract, not employment, where I answer to no direct supervisor, full discretion to choose which projects I support and which I walk away from. A mandatory ethics review policy embedded into future restructuring protocols. They took notes. No one interrupted. I wasn't asking for revenge. I was asking for repair. Celeste closed the folder in front of her. I'll need to bring this to the board. I expect nothing less, I replied. Then I stood, offered my hand once more, and left the room. No anger, no victory speech. Just a quiet, firm step out of a place that once called me expendable. Later that evening, as I sat with Evelyn on the back porch, she asked, "So, did they say yes?" I shook my head. Not yet. She sipped her tea. "But they will." I looked at her, smiling. "Yeah, they will." Because this wasn't about getting back what they took. It was about proving I never needed their permission to matter in the first place. 2 weeks passed before the envelope arrived. It came by certified mail, stamped with Trinity's logo and marked private, Atten G. Lawson. I signed for it at the door, opened it with the calm precision of someone who already knew what was inside. They agreed to everything, every term, every clause, every boundary I'd set, respected in writing. The severance package was detailed, retroactive compensation outlined, a 1-year consulting agreement drafted and awaiting my signature, and at the back, a printed letter bearing the signatures of 3 board members and Celeste herself. This letter serves as formal acknowledgement of Mr. Graham Lawson's 17 years of exemplary service, technical leadership and professional integrity. I read every word slowly. Not for ego, for closure, but I didn't sign the consulting contract. Not immediately. Because in the weeks following the investigation, something had started to shift inside me. I wasn't waking up every morning with Trinity on my mind anymore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vindictive. I was building again. It started as an idea scribbled in a notebook, Independent Systems Review and Integrity Consulting. Then came a name, Iron Path Analytics. Then a sketch, my old house's silhouette blended into a server rack. A metaphor, something solid, rooted, reliable. I registered the business, built a small website, bought the domain. Clients came slowly, a referral here, a non-profit there, but they came, and not one of them asked me how I left Trinity. They just wanted the kind of honesty that doesn't show up on resumes. Tom Myers called one night. "Got a weird question," he said. "You ever think about running a workshop?" "A workshop?" "Yeah, like teaching junior techs, ethics, real-world problem-solving, stuff we don't get from textbooks." I hadn't thought of it, but I didn't say no, because something about that sounded more fulfilling than running diagnostics or patching firmware. It sounded like passing on what mattered. Evelyn found me at my desk the next morning, buried in notes and sketches. "Are you going to sign the Trinity offer?" she asked. I looked up at her, smiled, and said, "Only if I get to choose the blueprint." She nodded slowly. "You already have." Later that day I signed the contract on my own letterhead, as Iron Path Analytics, as a consultant, as a man they couldn't erase. The doors hadn't changed. Same brushed metal handles, same glass panes, same faint chemical scent that clung to every floor of the Trinity Systems headquarters. I pushed them open one last time, not as Graham Lawson the employee, but as Graham Lawson of Iron Path Analytics, walking under a badge labeled Vendor Systems Advisor. The receptionist didn't recognize me. That was fine. It wasn't her memory I was here to claim. I checked in, signed the visitor log, and waited in the same lobby where I'd once spent late nights troubleshooting server rollouts. Only this time, I wasn't wearing company blues. I was in a charcoal blazer and slacks, comfortable professional mine. Celeste met me at the elevator. "Welcome back," she said softly. "Let's keep it short," I replied with a small nod. She smiled. "Of course." We walked the hall I once owned with muscle memory. I passed old faces, some surprised, others unreadable. No one stopped me. No one whispered, because everyone knew what had happened, even if they weren't allowed to say it. I entered the IT conference room, not to be briefed, but to brief them. I presented a new infrastructure layout, risk flags, vendor trace analysis, firewall loopholes still unresolved from the Dennis era. They took notes, asked questions. I answered them calmly. No bitterness, no gloating, just quiet precision. Afterward, Celeste walked me out. "I hope this isn't your last time here," she said. I turned to her before reaching the exit. "This building taught me a lot," I said. "About systems, about people, about what happens when loyalty is mistaken for silence." She didn't respond, only nodded, as if acknowledging more than just words. As I stepped outside, the sunlight hit different. Not because the world had changed, but because I had. I pulled my phone from my pocket and typed a quick message. "Workshop confirmed. Let's teach the next ones how to do it right. GL." I didn't look back at the building, because this wasn't a return. It was a reclamation, not of a job, not of revenge, but of identity. They fired me thinking it would be my ending, but I wasn't an employee anymore. I was the architect of something they'd never control again.